Lithuanians that are thinking of expanding their business to US. I've met Suhas through a common introduction, a friend from the Bay Area. Suhas also was in the Bay Area himself for a while. And not to mention, he's also worked with a good number of Lithuanians already. So he's pretty familiar with like the business culture in Lithuania, and having experienced US and lived in San Francisco, he really does an amazing job like bridging the cultural differences and nuances. So I'm personally very excited to see his presentation and learn from it. And I would encourage everyone to participate. So turn on your camera if it's not 6 a.m. where you are, and type in questions in the chat, and let's make it interactive and useful. We scheduled this webinar at this time because there's a big number of Lithuanian companies coming to the North American Lithuanian Business Forum in a couple weeks, as well as the Bio Convention in Boston. And so there's going to be, over 100 people from Lithuania coming to US, and hopefully a good number of you are in that cohort where this will be a good refresher of things to keep in mind and be strategic about your time here. And without further ado, thanks for joining, and Suhas, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here, Carlos. Thank you for the introduction, and good early morning, everybody in the Bay Area, and good afternoon for those of you in Europe. We're going to start. I'm going to share my screen right away and get right into it. Carlos, you can see it okay? All good? Okay, perfect. So
all good.
We're going to go through the following slides, but I want to make sure that what we do today is very interactive and is very helpful to everybody here. So feel free to interrupt me with questions. You can drop questions into the chat window, and we'll pause every now and then to take some questions from there as well. So as Carlos mentioned, we're going to speak about US business culture specifically for the Lithuanian audience. And this is one of my most favorite slides to always begin all my talks with. It's the content of the audience is far more important than the content of the talk, right? I give these sort of lectures to all kinds of folks all over the world, including folks from Spain, Swiss Next, Innovation Center Denmark, and it's been tuned differently for each of the audience segments. So a bit about me. Who is Suhas? So I am first and foremost an American. I am from Washington, D.C. originally, and then spent about 8 years in San Francisco in startup land, founding, operating, advising several startups over the years. And after about 8 years, I started working with several consulates in the Bay Area, the Swiss, the Danish, the Spanish, the Italians, and helping them help their companies from their countries come to the US for venture capital investment, for opening up new business lines, et cetera. And eventually, about 4 years ago, I moved to Madrid, Spain permanently, and now live here and help European companies basically expand to the US with GTM and communication tactics and things like that. So in any case, today, what we're going to do is make it highly impactful, in the sense that I want everybody in the room to imagine that you are entering a meeting in New York City, or any city in the US as you wish, to pitch your company to a prospective customer. What should you do and what should you not do as you're entering the room, right? So there's 4 things. How do you pitch your company, yourself? How do you read the room? How do you ask for what you want? Is it money? Is it investment? Whatever you need. And how do you walk away and negotiate successfully? So we're going to walk through all 4 of these in a very tactical way. I'll give you real tools you can use. And again, feel free to interrupt me anytime with questions as well. However, before you enter the room in New York City, we're going to talk about very common mistakes I've seen many international folks make in the US when trying to do business. Okay. There's a famous saying, a mistake is not a mistake unless you make it twice. The first time is a lesson. So these are all mistakes I've seen and lessons I've seen learned. So hopefully you can learn from them. First and foremost, in the US business culture, we don't really interrupt each other in business. In other cultures like Spain or Southern Europe, it's very common to interrupt and have these conversations. In the US, it's really one-sided. So in conversations, it's best not to interrupt. In my experience working with many folks from the Baltics, this is not really an issue. What does become an issue is when you become interrupted, it is not a negative thing. It is a very, very positive thing. It means folks are actually interested in what you are selling. So if you're interrupted, just stop talking and just answer that question immediately and don't postpone the answer. Getting interrupted is a very, very good thing in US business culture if you are the one doing the selling. Okay. Second rule, and I wish this actually came first because this is the most important rule. When answering a question in a business pitch, in a business meeting, it is extremely important to not ramble on for 5-10 minutes of a meeting, especially if you only have 30 minutes set aside for a meeting. So the rule I like to tell people is the rule of 90 seconds. When answering a question, speak for no more than 90 seconds, answer the question, and move on. Right? I've seen too many, especially in venture capital land, too many founders who come to the US asking for investment. The VC asks the question, the VC has 10 questions, but if you spend half the time answering one question, it's kind of a useless meeting. So remember, 90 seconds, no more. This is such an important rule. I put 2 slides around it. And there's a very famous quote, I'm not sure who it's from, but it goes, I would have written a shorter letter, but I ran out of time. Right? It is easy to answer a question for 10-15 minutes. It is difficult to answer the same question in 90 seconds or less. So when you can, speak less, fewer words, and just be concise and straight, direct to the point. The last point especially, I think you'll see me making many, many times in today's talk. Okay? So another common mistake I see is folks speaking too much about the features of their product, of their technology, of their business, and not enough about the benefits. So a very easy way to understand this is if you were trying to sell an umbrella to me, you won't come and tell me, look, this is a wooden handle, it's very lightweight, and it has a canopy that's water resistant, right? That is all features. You'll say, look, it's raining, this will keep you dry. Give me 10 euros and buy it for me, right? So in this sense, especially in American business culture, we're all about the benefits versus the minuscule features. And I like to say that most Americans, when deciding to buy a product or a service from somebody, there's only 3 reasons they would choose to give you their money. Number 1, whatever you're selling, it saves them time. Or number 2, it saves them money. Or number 3, it makes them more money, right? You either save time, you save them money, or you make them more money. Ideally, you do all 3, whatever you're selling. So any case, speak about benefits, ideally along these 3 axes, and not necessarily about the features behind what makes your product tick. Okay. Okay. And this is the slide I added in for this audience. This is a question I got from another Lithuanian company I was doing some work with. They told me, Suhas, every time we go into the US, they always start these meetings with this, how are you? And I want to make small talk. But I have no idea how to do so because whenever I say, how are you? They just say, good. Let's talk about the proposal you sent. And they never really engage in small talk with me. Why is that? Well, I realized it's because they're saying, how are you the wrong way. The correct way to engage in small talk, in the fact that you actually want to do some small talk and connect in a business meeting, is to instead say something like this. It says, hey, John, how are you? I'm a bit wiped. I'm a bit tired. As I ran a marathon over the weekend, how's everything on your end today? Right? And then John, the American, will say, oh, how cool. I'm also a marathon runner. Are you planning on doing the Boston Marathon this year? Right? And you have a conversation for a few minutes there. If you simply say, hi, John, how are you? How are you and hi are simply the same thing for us as Americans, unless you kind of open up first and tell us a bit more about you. Okay? This is a small nuance, but I realize it's extremely important to get right if you want to do small talk correctly. Okay. And then finally, the other common mistake I see is how to ask for questions. And this is actually universal. This is not just international folks coming to the US, but many times in presentations or you're doing a big business pitch, you'll go at the very end and say, do you have any questions? And nobody will ask you anything. That's not what you want. People don't want to say, yes, I have questions because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to say, I didn't understand anything you told me, but I can't say that out loud. Right? So instead, if you say, what questions do you have so far? That implies that the audience has questions in mind, that implies that you're open to taking discussion points around whatever you presented. So what questions do you have so far? Instead of do you have any questions? So to that end, let me pause here. What questions do you have so far? Carlos, any questions so far?
Good question. I would say, like the how are you thing is like, yes, like the example you gave is a good one, but maybe tell me about a time like where you really also struggle to engage someone, and like maybe what are other things besides from just saying, this is what I did yesterday.
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is why the importance of pre-work is so important. If I'm meeting with the prospect for half an hour in New York, I will do a good hour of research on the prospect themselves, who they are, they have other hobbies, etc., and sort of work that way into my conversation to build rapport early on. So the more pre-work you do, the easier it is to build rapport when you are in the meeting.
Makes sense. Where are you based, Suhas?
I'm based in Madrid, Spain.
Sweet. And do you plan to visit Lithuania?
I was in Lithuania a few months ago. I'll be there a bit later on, yeah.
Nice. I'll be there as well, so maybe we should meet up for a coffee.
Perfect. There we go. Nice. Okay, so now let's go on to the meat of the presentation today. So we're going to go and imagine again that you are in New York. You're about to enter a meeting room at a very large company, and you're going to pitch, okay, to a prospective customer who could buy your product. So, first off, how should you pitch your company? And the way I like to tell people to do so is something called an efficient boast. This is extremely important in the US market because Americans, they have lots of businesses coming to them asking for business, right? Asking to buy their product, etc. So we need to stand out from the noise from the very first sentence that we say to the prospect. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of what an efficient boast looks like. And you will immediately understand what I mean by this. So let's say that I'm CEO of a company called Acme Co. I'm in fintech and I sell risk models for the financial services sector. Okay. And I'm in New York and I'm pitching myself to JP Morgan Chase as a bank. And I say, hey, John, so just to give you a quick background, what we do at Acme Co., I'm going to read number 1 here. At Acme Co., my company, we deliver real-time risk models built on machine learning-driven anomaly detection. Leading banks, hedge funds, and insurance carriers rely on our platform to safeguard over 2 trillion in assets. Okay, so immediately in just about 15 seconds in 2 sentences, you can see that I have expertise, amazing customers already, impactful tech, and also a very good industry impact, right? So an efficient boast to tell what I've done, who I am, and the fact that I'm a big deal, right? And I stand out from the noise he gets every day. Another way to say the same thing. Number 2, since our inception 10 years ago, we have grown to a staff of nearly 100 engineers that manages 24/7 threat monitoring across 5 SOCs. Our ISO certification and 100% breach detection rate have solidified our reputation in the sector. So here, same business, same area. Here I'm emphasizing our growth, how big my team is, my capacity, and my reputation I have, right? Efficient boast along different avenues. And finally, number 3, let's say I'm speaking to a university in New York or something, right? Something more research focused. Here, I would say something like, with a singular emphasis on deep reinforcement learning algorithms, my company attains sub-millisecond anomaly detection, protecting trading desks and clearinghouse from flash crash risks. So here I'm focusing on my tech, my quality, my position, and a very good use case. So the point of the matter is figure out how to efficiently boast about what you've done along several angles, your expertise, your customers, your tech, your team size. There's so many ways to boast about what you do, and you can tune it to who you're speaking with. Okay. Now, this is a slide that I put in mostly for the Eastern Europeans. I've seen it's a bit of a struggle because Eastern Europeans I find to be very modest and prefer not to boast so much, especially in the first 90 seconds. But this is crucial. If you don't do this, they're going to forget about you because remember, there's 100 other companies similar to yours that are coming asking for their business, especially if it's a very large business. Carlos, you have a question? You raise your hand. You're on mute.
On mute, thanks. I was just going to ask if anybody would share kind of like their pitch here as an example of like a version of this. You can just throw it in the chat as we go,
Yeah.
but it'd be nice to like dig into one specific example and just see how it can be improved.
Yeah, throw it in the chat. We'll edit it real time a bit later on. Okay, so there's three things to keep in mind when designing your efficient boast pitch. Proof points, your customer list, testimonials, case studies. You can see I have a few of those in the prior slide. Your expertise, research papers, your IP. The most important one is the last one, is differentiation. Remember, the US is a very gigantic market. Everybody wants a piece of it. There's a lot of companies that are similar to yours coming and trying to sell their services. So it is very important that in your efficient boast, you have a way of differentiating amongst the others. And again, it can be along various angles, your service, your speed, your quality, safety, efficiency, etc. The one thing that you don't want to differentiate on in this efficient boast is don't tell the Americans that you are the cheapest software out there, the cheapest product out there. You want to avoid the price war. Even if you are the cheapest and least expensive solution, a better way to pitch this is to say, look, we are the most cost effective or cost efficient way to solve this problem. The reason you don't want to do that is perception trumps reality. You don't want to give the perception of a cheap product, right? Inexpensive, cost efficient is far better than coming off as cheap. So avoid price wars and differentiation, okay? All right, so now let's go to the second step of the scenario. So again, we're about to enter the pitch room in New York City. We're gonna talk about our business. We've done our efficient boast, and now there's a bunch of Americans in the boardroom, and we need to figure out how to read the room properly. Are they buying what we're saying? Do we need to convince them, etc.? So how do we do that? So what I've done for you is I've put together the 4 most typical buyer personas you will encounter in the US. Okay, you have the analyzers, the passive folks, the socializers, and the drivers. And along each of these 4, I've kind of told you what they do and how to sell to them and what not to do. So the analyzer, you'll see a lot, especially in CFOs or accountants, et cetera, highly detail-oriented, very, very logical, extremely risk-averse. When selling to them, we need to make sure we have proven results, ROI models, et cetera. What you want to do when you walk in the room is try to figure out which of these 4 the main decision maker belongs to, and then sort of adjust your pitch accordingly. The second one is passive, kind of a quiet, cautious, agreeable persona. They really hate confrontation. They're all about trust and simplicity. They want to make it an easy sale, okay? And the third, socializer, this is the easiest one to spot from a mile away. You can probably hear them. Very outgoing, extremely loud, expressive, high energy. They're all about having good rapport. You need to become their friend first before they do business with you, usually. And then finally, you have the driver, right? Very direct, very results driven. They kind of speak in bullet points, and they're all about control and efficiency. So the thing to keep in mind with these 4 personas that you'll encounter is that in US sales specifically, success from the salesperson or the CEO flying over there, it often comes from adapting your personality to the buyer personality of the 4 that I just showed you. So these personas can help you adjust your own tone, your content, even the way you speak to help build trust faster. So it's crucial to figure out which bucket the main decision maker falls into and adjust your personality to ensure you connect with them. Okay. So I want to add in one additional dimension to this, which is that America is a very, very large country. I haven't even shown Alaska, which will take up almost half of this map here, and nor Hawaii. And each it's so large that it takes up almost all of Europe. And if you were to sell to somebody in Warsaw versus Paris or Rome, you would speak to them very differently. You would do business extremely, extremely differently, right? And even within a state, this is Texas, and Texas takes up almost all of the Baltics plus a bit of Sweden as well. Even within a state, the cultures are quite different as well. So what's crucial to understand is that each region has significant differences in business culture. And what I've done here for you is I've broken down these 5 sections into the main characteristics and how best you can sell to them, okay? So we're going to start with the West Coast, where Carlos and Diana are based right now. And on the West Coast, if you're flying over there doing business meetings, you'll usually encounter very innovative, collaborative, very relaxed business culture. right? San Francisco, LA, Seattle, very progressive. So here in doing business pitches, et cetera, it's important to be kind of friendly, optimistic, collaborative, and openness to new ideas, right? That's really the emphasis in this section. Now, compare that to the South. If you're going to Texas, you're going to Arizona, here it's quite different. There's a very strong focus on long-term relationships here. The business space is a bit slower. It's a bit more steady and intentional. The decisions are really based more on shared values, right? You might have the best technology, but if you don't align with how they're thinking about things, it might not go there. So how to sell to them? It's a bit more about personal connection, politeness. I wouldn't really force a deal down them. It's a bit more patience here as well. Okay, so a bit different. If we go to the Midwest, this is the most similar to Baltic business culture in my experience. So here for example, in Chicago, Indiana, Ohio, it's all about emphasizing work ethic, dependability, modesty, right? Relationships, personal credibility, they carry significant weight in this area of the US. So here it's quite important to be friendly with lots of small talks, showing trustworthiness. I wouldn't show a really fancy presentation or make some crazy claims. I would really be very modest and sort of to the point. Very similar to the Baltic culture in all honesty here. Now, in the Southeast, Atlanta, South Carolina, North Carolina, those places, here it's all about the tradition and the hospitality. They're a bit more formal. I wouldn't go to a meeting in jeans and a t-shirt. This is more of a suit and tie kind of a place. It's a bit more hierarchical. You don't really expect a decision in one day. You have to kind of talk to the boss and the boss's boss. And the way to sell to them is to be really all about the respect and personable, more so about rapport, kind of like how it is in Texas. And here I would really avoid any overly casual or blunt language. It's a bit more formal in the South. Now, finally, in the Northeast, this is also quite an extreme in the US. This is a highly competitive, this is New York, DC, Philadelphia, Boston, that I know a lot of you are going here. Very fast moving, results oriented, communication is extremely direct. It's quite formal as well, especially in New York and upper Northeast. And here it's important to lead with results, lead with numbers, right? Data, clarity. I wouldn't really do too much of the small talk here. I just be very assertive, very confident, and get to the point, right? And it's okay to argue with them and go back and forth. It's expected. So it's quite different. So what I've done as well for you is I've aligned the 4 dominant personas that we reviewed earlier, and I've put them against the regions where you will most likely encounter them. Okay. So for example, in San Francisco and in Seattle, et cetera, you'll see a lot of analyzers, right? Very detail oriented, very logical, risk averse kind of folks sometimes. So you know how to play to them. Again, in the Midwest here, passives, quiet, cautious, agreeable folks. And then in the South, right, Texas and Florida, all around the South, it's very, very social business environments down there. Be prepared for that. And then in the Northeast, as you can probably already guess, it's driver dominant. Okay. Yeah, this is almost, I would say the vast majority is going to be driver dominant there, very direct and results driven. One question I got the last time I did this was, how does this translate when I go to a business dinner? What is the percentage I should devote to talking about business versus non-business, right? If I'm in each of these regions. And I thought it was a very insightful question. So I broke it down, and I wish I put it in the slide deck, but basically in the Northeast, you can expect at a business dinner to speak 80% business, 20% social, okay? In the South, it's gonna be the opposite. It's gonna be 20% business, 80% social things, okay? And then these two are, what I found in my experience is usually split 50-50. 50% business, 50% and everything else. So just be prepared for that when you go out to these dinners and things like that. So let me pause here. This is a good halfway point on questions that folks have, and you can put them in chat as well. And Diana, Carlos, feel free to chime in since you've been living in the US as well, if you've seen this to be true.
I love this layout because it really fits what I've experienced. I lived in Chicago for 10 years. It was also kind of interesting when you said like, oh, the Midwest is very much like the Baltics, because it's also like in the Midwest, it's the highest population of Lithuanians outside of Lithuania, and probably the same for Latvians and Estonians, I'm guessing. So it's just kind of interesting how Lithuanians ended up in a place that also is kind of most similar to what they come from, which is what us humans tend to do.
Yeah, exactly. Diana?
Yeah, that's very cool. And actually, next month will be my first time in Boston, so now like I feel much more prepared because San Francisco is quite different. So it is always,
Yes.
yeah. I just love this. This is like so right to the point, and sometimes you forget this. I knew about New York, but like Boston is like pretty close to New York, so yeah, that's like really, really tactical and great.
Yeah, absolutely. The mindset shift you have to do when flying from SF to Boston or New York is quite a bit. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a different country almost out there.
Let me just call out Paulius, because he was recently like on the East Coast for a conference, and I'm just curious, Paulius, how does this kind of way of organizing a very complex like country, does this make sense? What's your impression?
Well, it's difficult to comment. I mean, I just been there for a couple of weeks, and then I was 1 week in New York. But I think it's too little time to make a conclusion. For me, all Americans are very social, socializers, like the Lithuanians or Europeans, and risk averse. That's for me. I mean, compared with Europeans, for example, German customers, oh man, it's like day and night. It's much easier for me personally. I like to do business with US customers. It's much easier for me, much easier. And I like when they talk, because I don't like to talk. So I mean,
yeah, you must do great in the South end, because they'll talk your ears off, as we say in the South here. Okay, so let's go to the next section here, and then feel free to add questions and such in the chat. We can tackle them as they come in. So this is another favorite quote of mine. It says, "The art of communication is a language of leadership," right? And the best leaders I've seen are also happen to be the best communicators. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And so if you are going to the US, you need to really understand the way we communicate, more so even, I would say, how we communicate. And so I put together a table here that has a lot of common expressions that I've seen we Americans use. And for an international person, it might be kind of difficult to understand exactly what this means, a hidden meaning behind all of these, okay? The positive ones are easy, especially if you're in a business meeting in New York and you're pitching your business. Okay, I wouldn't worry about that. Let's talk about the negative ones, and I've highlighted 4 of them for this audience specifically that would be good to discuss in further detail. So the first one I want to discuss with you is something called, "We'll take that offline." Okay, if you hear that in a meeting in Boston, wherever, just stop talking about it ASAP. It's not a priority. You said something that really you should not be speaking about right now. Just avoid it, okay, and move on from that subject. So that's just a nice way of saying that. Number 2, this is a funny one. We should definitely catch up sometime. You hear this all the time, and that usually means I don't have time to meet up, but I'm being polite. If I actually want to meet up with you, I'll schedule a time ASAP, right? So that's another one that I've seen come up in Q&A quite often. And the number 3 here is, we are not ready to make a move just yet, okay? This is a very common way of saying, I'm stalling, I don't want to sign anything right now, I'm avoiding a commitment. We're going to come back to this one because this is one of the most common reasons a business deal doesn't happen right there when you are and you've made the flight all the way to the US and you want to get a deal done. We'll talk about how to deal with this specifically, but this is a way to say we're stalling, but there's still a way to say yes, get a yes from them. Finally, the last one, let's table this for now. This I realized recently in the UK, this actually means let's talk about it right now, right? Put this on the table. In the US, it means the exact opposite. It means we do not want to talk about this right now. We are not moving forward with this, and we probably will not. So the opposite meaning in the US and the UK, this means this is a very positive thing. Let's talk about it right now, okay? So there's a lot more on here, and you can read it a bit later on, but I wanted to highlight these 4 negative or deflective avoidance signals and their hidden meaning. So this is a bit of a cultural translator here. Okay, so now let's go back to the scenario here, and we're back in New York. We're in the meeting room. We did our efficient boast. We've read the room. We're dealing with a driver personality. we made our pitch. Now, how do we ask for their business, right? How do we ask for money from them? So there are 4 building blocks before you can really ask for a business deal or money or something from the other party. And these building blocks go in order: value, trust, rapport, and the most important one, urgency. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to build engagement along all of these building blocks. So the very first one that you have to get right before you go on to the next one is value. And when we speak about value, it comes back to that efficient boast I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation. It's demonstrating that we have a clear ROI. We are all about solving their problem. And Americans especially, we expect direct, quantified value. Remember the 3 reasons that an American will buy from you, right? It is you're either helping them save money, save time, or make more money. So when we emphasize value, we need to say, look, this will help you reduce losses by 30% within 60 days, as an example, right? Versus saying this is a powerful tool for experiments, right? So vague benefits is very low trust. So speak about value in clear quantitative terms that shows how you save them money, save them time, or make them more money. Once you've gone after the value, then we need to speak about trust. So trust is basically a different way of saying reliability, right? That you are reliable. And how do we show that? Well, there's a couple of hacks you can do. Ideally, you have customers already from Europe or Lithuania. You can say, look, all these big companies in Europe are paying me money for my product. It works. I have social proof. I have testimonials. I have big logos. Okay. However, still, Americans, as you may have known if you've gone to do business with them, we're quite friendly, right? We're quite social. We smile a lot, but we're quite cautious buyers. And we need to really trust the other person before signing on the dotted line. And the best way you can earn trust with an American, especially if it's the very first meeting you're doing with them, is earned in follow-up and deadlines and transparency. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in New York, the meeting ended, and you say, okay, this is great. I will send you an email within 24 hours summarizing all the things we spoke about, and we can go from there. And it's been 2 days, it's been 3 days, and you still have not sent an email. And then you send an email. If I, as an American, receive the email 3 days late, I'm not going to do business with you because I can't trust you. If I can't trust you to do a 24-hour commitment to send me an email, how can I trust you to do $1 million deal, right? So the trust is broken. So trust is super important, and that's why it's one of the pivotal ones here. And even a simple thing like sticking to a deadline of following up in 24 hours is extremely, extremely important. Okay. Then we're going to talk about rapport. Small talk matters quite a bit in the US. You might think it's kind of silly that we keep asking each other, how are you or how your weekend was, but it's really a cultural thing. It's trust building, it's rapport building, warmth, shared experiences, things like that. Even in B2B, if you're selling 7-8 figure deals, people buy from people that they like, right? So we need to be likable. We need to have a personal connection beyond simply professional colleagues. So this is quite important. Usually, the larger the deal size, this actually takes more importance because it's a long-term commitment that you're going to be married together for quite a bit of time doing business together. So this is also quite crucial. Now, the most important one that you cannot fail to do is urgency. This is a question that I almost always get when I do these talks. They say, Suhas, you know, I flew to the US, I spent a month there, I did all these amazing business meetings, and they all said, yes, you know, I'll buy your product, this sounds amazing. But when I came back to Europe, nobody actually gave me a purchase order. Nobody actually bought from me. Why is that? Well, I said, did you give them the reason to buy today? What was the reason that they need to buy today? Why can't they buy 6 months from now, right? So unless you create urgency, unless you use time limits, bonuses, scarcity, or some sort of cost of inaction framing, Americans will just procrastinate and won't buy today. What's the reason for buying today when I can buy 3 months from now, right? Reduce my risk. Maybe the company will go bankrupt. Who knows? So we need to use urgency to drive decisions, especially in competitive environments. Without urgency, no American will buy. In my experience, I work globally here. Americans are often the most procrastinators I've seen when it comes to making a decision doing business with somebody else. So this is crucial. If you don't get urgency right, you won't do a deal. And we'll talk about that in the negotiation section on how to manufacture urgency. Okay. Okay, so again, 4 building blocks: value, trust, rapport, and urgency. They go in order. You can't do one without the other. So start at the bottom and work your way to the top, okay? And then whatever you're asking for, just be direct. If you want a business deal, if you want a pilot project, if you want an investment, just have to say, I want this, and just be direct. There's no need to speak in riddles. Sometimes, especially in East Asian cultures, it's a bit more indirect, but here it's extremely, extremely direct. So the final portion of the scenario here is on negotiations and walking away with a successful sale. I want you to return to Europe with a contract in hand, not wait 6 months in Europe for somebody to eventually pay you, right? So how do we walk away with a successful sale once we've done our ask? So I'm going to give you some tactical American negotiation tips. There's a lot of things that we value, as you've probably heard me tell you 3 times already: clear data and ROI, right? Making money, saving time, confidence, decision-making, making sure it's a win-win for us, for everybody. And the one thing I really want to highlight today is, and this is, again, comes from mistakes I've seen people make, is when giving prices or discounts, there has to be a reason behind it. I've seen too many international folks come to the US and say, look, these are my prices, but I'm going to give you 10% off. And then the American sits there and says, okay, but why are you giving it 10% off? That's very suspicious. So there's something wrong with the product. What's the reason behind this? And so this is a very, very common mistake I want to help you not make in negotiations. So when we do discounting, which is a very valid way to do business, we need to tie discounting to urgency. Remember that value ladder? And I told you the most important one is at the very top: urgency, and how to manufacture urgency. The best way to do so is to tie urgency with discounts. So all discounts you give should serve a purpose and should be time bound. So for example, let's say it's May 22nd, I'm heading to the US, and I'll go to a customer in New York and say, look, these are the prices. I'm giving you 10% off because we're running a deal through the end of spring. And when Q3 starts in June, this goes away. So they have a reason to now do a deal immediately in the next 9 days, because in June 1st, I'm going to lose 10%, right? So all discounts should serve a purpose. They should have some sort of time-bound metric to them. It creates urgency. You're not selling the same thing over and over again. And you want to make sure you're adding value to them to make sure they buy immediately. Okay, so whatever you do, discounts and urgency go hand in hand. Never one without the other. Understood? Feel free to ask questions as you wish. Okay, so again, I'm going to give you some American English terms here to help you negotiate with tactical phrases. And there's a lot of ways we say the same thing, but the one thing I want to highlight is the last one. And many times we'll do negotiations in a deal, we'll talk about it verbally, and we'll fail to memorialize it in a written fashion, and then it gets confused, and there's lots of bad things happen from that. So at the end of all of these negotiations, wherever they end up, what we want to do is to say one magic sentence and say, look, just to summarize, we've agreed on you buying X amount for Y amount of dollars, and the next steps are this. I'll send an email in 24 hours to memorialize this. Okay? So it's very crucial to get this right. Otherwise, there's a lot of issues that come into hand. And I've given you several ways that you can use to help negotiate objections and things like that on this page as well. Questions, thoughts? Feel free to interrupt. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 more sections, and as this is kind of a bonus here, on some communication hacks. And this has come mostly from questions I received from folks in the Baltics around this. And it's a very common scenario that I've seen play out almost on a monthly basis. So let's say you have flown from Lithuania all the way to California, you've met a prospect, you've showed your presentation deck, you've showed samples of your product, have a demo, and they say, wow, this is amazing, I want to buy this product, send me a license for 100 users. So you send them a quote, it's been 7 days, you've emailed them, you've called them, you've texted them on WhatsApp, they have not gotten back to you. So what in the world do you do in this situation? which happens all the time, whether you're a startup seeking funding from venture capitalists or you're a CEO of a company trying to sell your goods in the US. What do you do, right? So just out of curiosity, I mean, Carlos, Diana, what would you do if you got the situation? I'm sure this has come up for you in current roles and prior roles.
Well, it's not a fair question to me because I've done sales, and so I would say you need 7 touch points. So you haven't followed up enough, and through different channels. So, shoot a text, email, try a call. You're still in the process. This is not a lost
3 is
deal.
not enough. You're saying you would do 7. Okay, got it. And Diana?
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree because, sometimes we get discouraged if there is no immediate response. So it's just like keep following up. Things happen. Sometimes people have, vacation plans or business trips. So yeah, just be persistent. And I cannot emphasize the importance of following up right away when you meet. Just send a short note or something. But just like if you connected on LinkedIn, that's not enough. There are like so many more steps that's like crucial. And we see a lot of this with, Lithuanian founders that, oh, I connected on LinkedIn. So what? So the same thing.
Yeah, it's not enough. You need to be more persistent. Okay, excellent.
And I would add to make it informative. So it's not just like, hey, did you get this? Like, hey, that's not helpful. When we talk about follow up, it needs to be still like informative and moving the deal along. So, it's been 2 weeks and you're sending the 4th email, share like a win, like, oh, we just signed another customer. Like, okay, like you're creating validation. Or like, remember we talked about this news and like that company ended up like buying or selling, or just something that like actually educates. I feel like that's the best way, is educating rather than selling, is like talking about like let the buyer do the sale. Like you're just educating there and learning about their needs. So strategies like that. Would love to hear from the audience too.
And I would add also, if you're like in touch with them, just follow them on LinkedIn or see what they're doing and mention that you know what's going on. So just make it like informal and like try to connect, build the trust, because trust is like, the biggest thing probably in the US, especially in the West Coast.
Yeah, agreed. Any other responses, thoughts, ideas? One time when I asked this question, somebody in the audience said, "Show up where their kids go to school and wait for them."
Don't do that.
That's a little too much. Yeah.
Too much.
The craziest answer I've got for this question. Well, here, why don't I don't know if somebody has another thought. Okay, I'll show you what I have done personally. This is screenshots from my own emails from years ago. So same situation, and this is me in a situation with an investor who promised to give me some money. And basically, it's been 7 days, right? So I sent this email, and it's called a no question to trigger a response. It says, "Hey, Joe, should we postpone discussions for the time being?" Right? One line. He can read it on his iPhone without even opening up the mail app. So he sent it. I sent it at 11:06. I got a reply in basically half an hour. And he said, "Suhas, sorry for the delay. I had prepared to reach out to you this afternoon," which I don't think that's true, but okay. "I'll be wiring you a total of X amount of money." And he did it, right? So this kind of no question, should we postpone discussions for the time being, where I expect a no, or I'm writing them off as a no, I use it almost on a weekly basis for all kinds of different things. And many times in life, a no is better than a maybe. I would not want to waste more time on a prospect to get them to say yes to me, especially in America when we have so many opportunities coming in. This is very important. So here, another instance, I'm trying to sell my product to somebody, and I say, "Hey, should we cancel for the discussions for the time being?" And again, look at the date, within 1 day, they respond and says, "Hey, thanks for following up. Apologies for the delay in responding." They almost always apologize because they realize when getting such a brusque email like this, they know they're in the fault. "I had a quick chat with my boss, and we're not going to buy your product." Okay, that's fine. At least they're in the know, right? So in any case, use this in those situations, and you'll be surprised at the results and how fast they come, right, within a day. Questions, thoughts? This is not considered rude. That's another question I always get here. This is totally not rude. You can send this out, especially in the US, no issues getting an email like this. They know what you want, and You either want to say yes or no. Okay. All right. So we're gonna end with a framework that I love to use for dealing with objections. So especially in the US, we're going to deal with a lot of objections, mostly from the driver personalities that you'll hit in New York and Boston and DC. They'll say, look, this is great, but you're too expensive. I have no budget. I have a competitor solution. I have so many other things they'll say no on. So how do you deal with these objections? You can write an objection handling document, so you memorize all the answers you can give, but sometimes you'll hear an objection you don't even think about, right? Like, oh, I need approval from my VP. So how do you deal with that? The best framework I found in my own personal experience in sales and BD is something called the feel, felt, found framework. Okay, feel, felt, found. And I'll give you an example. So let's say the objection is your product is too expensive. So I would say, okay, Joe, I understand how this might seem expensive to you. I feel the pain that you have with this notion of it being expensive. However, when speaking with some other folks in your industry, they felt that the ROI, the return on investment from investing in this product, was quite positive. They recouped their money in just 3 months. They found that it was a very strong ROI, right? So feel, felt, found. What you want to do is you want to acknowledge their concern. You don't want to say, oh, this is not expensive at all. What are you talking about? You say, yes, I understand it can seem expensive. I feel that it can feel expensive. However, others have felt that it was still worth it because they found that, right? Got an ROI, I don't know, found it, saved the money, etc. So feel, felt, found. When you don't know how to object, just think feel, felt, found and try to frame it this way. Okay, so I'm going to end here with final recommendations that I encourage everybody to check out. These are my favorites from years of doing this. First and foremost, the culture map, right? This is excellent to understand business cultures all around the world, not just the US, and how we can decode each other. Never Split the Difference. This is where I borrowed the No question from. So this is an excellent book here, probably one of my favorites of all time. Eat What You Kill, Sam. So this is where I got the 4 personas you'll most likely get. He has excellent details around that. And then finally, Influence, which has been around for quite some time and helps with communication hacks. And if you are like podcast, Acquired, How I Built This are excellent to help understand a bit more about US business culture. And then also, just as a bonus here, I put together, this is brand new, I just did this recently, a US communications assessment. So you can scan this QR code or go to my website, usa.timelyvc.com. And with just 10 questions, you will get an assessment, including a radar chart, a score, and then also priority areas for improvement on how to improve your US communication style before you even go to the US. It's just 10 quick questions and you can get this in about 2 minutes. So you can check this out over here. Okay, so right on time. Thank you very much. Hope that was helpful. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Suhas. This was great. I love these points and have experienced a lot of this myself as the differences. And it's really nice call to action to have that assessment as like something to make it tangible, because these are soft skills, right? So they're like hard to put your finger on, but I guess having that assessment could give you something that makes you more aware. Like even when looking at those 4 profiles of the US personas, like I right away knew like which one I am typically. And I think we all can move between those, but like we kind of have one that's typically most representative of our behavior.
That's right. Yeah, we all belong to at least one of those, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. And especially personally, I found very useful and interesting this geographic aspect, because, you know, I caught myself that usually I think about American culture in general terms. I mean, straight to business, social, friendly, but and of course we all understand that US is very large comparing with Europe, for instance. But this point of view of the differences inside US between among the states, there are very important to understand them, to catch them, and to use them in better way for our businesses.
Absolutely. And even, I'm from Washington, D.C. on the East Coast. And when I moved to San Francisco, California on the West Coast, I had to change completely the way I do business and communicate and interact. It's a different country, honestly. So even for an American, right, it's quite jarring to go from coast to coast into different businesses. So many times in the US, you'll hire region-specific salespeople because they know the region and how to interact over there as well. So it's an ongoing challenge, not just for foreigners, but also for Americans.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Thomas raising the hand.
Yeah, hi everyone. Suhas, thank you for your time. It was really great presentation. Just I would like if you can share your experience, not about different regions, in America, like East Coast, West Coast, but when you're speaking with different verticals or domains, different companies, like finance or oil and gas. Did you have experience on this?
Absolutely. It's also a very different way of doing it. I used to work in oil and gas. I used to work in fintech as well. So a completely different way of doing business as well. And sometimes what I help companies with is verticalizing, not just Americanizing, but also verticalizing their pitch, how they present, and how they communicate to a specific vertical. So, for example, in oil and gas, when I used to work there, it's a bit more it was a bit more informal, right? Versus in finance or consulting. So just knowing how to go about the socialization, the rapport building, it's quite different in that industry as well.
So I got a personal message that somebody tried to do the assessment, this QR code, and the access has been denied. Can you check on this? I don't know if you had some experience.
Okay. Maybe I'll fix the QR code later and get back to you. But the website should be up, USA.Timely VC.
Okay, perfect. But see, there is already like interest, which is good. So we're all got excited.
Excellent. Yeah, I hope it'll be helpful because it gives you a 30, 60, 90-day plan for how you can improve to, go from a 3.0 to a 5.0 score.
Oh, that's amazing, because I think most of us, we think we know, we know how to communicate and all this stuff. But when we see the actual assessment, that's we know when we know or we don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's good to know where we are before we can improve. Yeah.
Okay. We have like 4 minutes left, but if any last questions, just but that was great, actually. That was amazing. I learned a lot myself too, because I think I know the West Coast. I'm being here for too long, but East Coast is a very different story. So yeah, if I need to move to New York, so I need to relearn everything. And you put everything in a very easy to digest form, which is wonderful, because sometimes all these things, they're like so hard to understand and really to grasp and to explain. So this is like super on point and super easy to follow. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to help, and hopefully this is helpful and tactically useful before a lot of folks here go to Boston. So 2 final things. If you want, you can book a time with me to work with me one-on-one. I use intro.co as a facilitator, and then I have a newsletter I send out every 3 weeks or so on topics like this, so you can have more details and things like that on a monthly basis. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn as well here. So thank you for the time. This was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, thanks for joining, and thanks everyone in the audience for tuning in. Have a nice evening, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we hope to see you many in Boston.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Ciao.